And Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Matt, let me start with you. Let's go back here to election night. You find out you have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republicans won the presidential election. You guys have total control. If I had told you on election night that with that, empowered like that, at day 100 of the next presidency, you would not have a single major piece of legislation passed and signed, would you believe that?
Actually, I would have, Steve, because I've been hanging around this town for the last 10 years, and I think we've seen a dysfunctional Congress that only works if there's an emergency or if a president has a supermajority in the Senate. And I think somehow, if our democracy is to function accurately, Congress has a lot more authority to take back from the other two branches, and the legislative process has to work. Steve, when Republicans came up with their alternative to Obamacare, they tried to hatch it inside leadership offices and sprung it on the American people, pushed it through two very long hearings, but hearings that basically lasted, went over the course of one day. That's not what the country needs to digest big, complicated policies, and you've got to work the committee process and let the American people listen in and have an influence.
And Jonathan Alter, I'm curious what you make of where Donald Trump stands and how this country kind of looks at him at day 100, because we've shown the polling this week. On the one hand, that approval rating, that's lower than you've ever seen for a president at this point. On the other hand, this was a guy who shattered all the records for sort of bad poll numbers and still winning an election, and that base that got him there, narrowly, but got him there, is still with him.
Yeah, the base is there. They want to give him a chance, but, you know, he actually has never great polling numbers, even though he won the election. And in terms of his first 100 days, they're the lowest by 20 or 30 points of any president at this time in his presidency. So it's not just that he hasn't gotten any bills through Congress. He's extraordinarily unpopular. We haven't had other presidents who've been under 50% at this point. Some of them, you know, John F. Kennedy, after he admitted error in the Bay of Pigs, showing some humility that Trump could learn from because it's very popular, he was at 83%, not the 40% of Trump. And Obama and LBJ and all the others, Jimmy Carter, they were all way over 50%. So he's an unpopular president right now, historically.
And Philip, I think that's the question that comes out of that to me is, are the rules different now, or are the rules different with Donald Trump? Politics just being played a different way by Donald Trump and being received in a different way by the public, where a 40% approval rating for Trump now can't really be compared to any of the predecessors?
It's very hard to say. I mean, it certainly is the case that Donald Trump is a unique character in the history of American presidents. But I think it's important to note, too, that I think there's a correlation between the fact that he hasn't moved any significant legislation and the fact that his core base of support is basically his only base of support, right? I mean, one of the things we have seen that has held true over the course of the first 100 days of his presidency is if you aren't a terribly popular president and you can't really rally people to your cause, Congress isn't going to rally to your cause and leave their base behind. I mean, certainly is the case that there's infighting among the Republicans, which is what stymied the health care bill, the overhaul bill. But it's not the case that there was a huge grassroots push on behalf of Donald Trump. And in part, I think that's because Donald Trump's base is just that same small base that barely got him over the finish line through 3 ties in the upper Midwest on November 8th.
And Matt, well, that base, I guess the question, we've been asking this really going back to the campaign, what would it take for that base to defect? If now a year in, if we get 2 years into this presidency and you're not talking about major legislative victories, are they gone then? Or is there just something else? Is there sort of something in the air culturally or whatever that keeps them glued to him when push comes to shove?
You're thinking about it from the wrong way. First of all, we're talking about legislative achievements. As far as how most voters look at Congress, the big achievement, the grand slam, is getting a Supreme Court nominee through the Senate. Yes, over 50 votes, not over 60 votes, but of course there is a historic tradition where Supreme Court nominees only need 50+1. So that's a big achievement. The second thing is Donald Trump is going to be successful politically if he does 3 things. The most important of that is if the economy gets growing and individual voters and individual Americans feel like their economic prospects are improving. Number 2, does he keep us safe? Do they feel secure? And number 3, is everybody in Washington perspiring, not because of the temperature, but because there's been an upset to the normal order? If he does those things, leading with the economy, I don't care what these polls say in the first 100 days, they're actually better than Jonathan, I think, alluded to. But what matters is those things, and that's why he's focused like a laser on getting the economy moving.
Let me ask you, Jonathan, about the state of the opposition. Obviously, Democrats seem very energized now. We've had these special elections. They haven't won, but you've certainly seen the energy. Peggy Noonan, conservative writer, Wall Street Journal. Let me show you what she said today. She said, Mr. Trump has struggled so colorfully the past 3 months, we've barely noticed his great good luck that in that time, the Democratic Party and the progressive left have been having a very public, nervous breakdown. She's saying that the Democrats are overreacting to the Trump presidency. What do you make of it? Do you see a Democratic Party that has learned from the election result, that has grappled with the election result, that is now responding to the concerns that were raised there? What do you make of the Democratic opposition?
Well, I don't think they're having a nervous breakdown, but I think Paul Begala made a good point when he said that parties out of power have a choice. They can either burn heretics or seek converts. And there's some Democrats who are really intent on burning heretics. You know, if you're not with them on everything, they want you out. And that's not the way to move forward for the Democratic Party. But I do think that the resistance has shown, you know, a lot of political passion and energy that we're seeing in some of these local races, these big demonstrations that will be very helpful for the Democrats moving forward. However, to really capitalize on it, they have to figure out how to reframe issues. They're just bad at this so far. So on health care, for instance, they're talking about things like, oh, these high-risk pools are no good, when they need to be saying, and they've been told by their advisors to say, no, this is discrimination against people who have had any kind of illness in their own life. It's medical apartheid, separate but unequal. Language that explains to the American people why the Republican position on that one, for instance, you know, is just out of step with American values. And Democrats have not been good at that.
Let me ask you, though, Philip, how important is it? I mean, when you're the opposition party, when you don't have the House, you don't have the Senate, you don't have the White House, how important is it that you really have a platform that you're running on versus you can just be the opposition party and say, hey, if you think they're going too far with their power, vote for us as a check?
Well, I mean, we need to go back in time 7 years and look what happened with the Republican Party when Barack Obama was elected, right? And the Republican Party and Democratic Party are very different parties. That's absolutely the case. But the Republican Party, they made the choice of ousting the heretics, right? I mean, the Tea Party insurgents in 2010 led to them retaking the House. It led to them having massive wins in 2014 out of the blue, right? They didn't win in 2012. That's certainly the case. But that was their strategy. Their strategy was, and it wasn't even a strategy, I shouldn't even say that, it was the grassroots pushed the people in Washington aside and basically said, this is the party that we want from here on out. It was extremely successful. And again, the Republican Party is different than the Democratic Party, particularly in turnout in midterm elections. That's an important consideration. But it is absolutely the case that this is a moment of opportunity for the Democrats, and I don't know that we know which path forward is the better one for the party. Yeah,
and Matt, quickly, the scant evidence we have right now about how the midterms might play out, you can look at these special elections, and, you know, Republicans won in Kansas, but that race was a lot closer than that district's seen in a long time. Right. And you take a look in Georgia, the Democrats, there's a runoff, they may still win it, but they were very close to 50. Do those two pieces of information there make you nervous as you start to look at 2018?
Yeah, Steve, I guess I shouldn't admit it. I hope not that many people are listening to me, but I ran congressional races in that Kansas 4 district. That was a wake-up call to the Republican Party that we better unify and come up with solutions that we promise the voters we'd deliver on. Don't look to Democrats to solve our problems, to make up our vote deficit. We've got to do it ourselves, and the voters are watching.
All right, Matt Schlapp, Philip Bump, Jonathan Alter, thank you.